The transit board reset to 14:07 for the third time in 11 minutes, and Senna Varro was the only person in the hall who looked up. She had noticed it the first time without understanding it, a flicker at the edge of her vision while she was checking her bag for her entry permit, the kind of flicker you dismiss as a tired eye or a faulty pixel. She had noticed it the second time with a vague, formless unease she could not name. By the third time she understood exactly what she was seeing, and the understanding sat in the center of her chest like a stone dropped into cold water. The board was wrong, not glitching, not cycling through a technical error the way a damaged display panel might. It was resetting with purpose. The numbers rolled back from whatever they had been: 14, 09, 14, 11. It varied slightly each time and settled again to 14:07 with a precision that was almost organic, like a breath being drawn in. Then time moved forward again, a steady, functional crawl through minutes that had never happened. Senna set her bag on the bench beside her and watched the board for a fourth cycle. 14 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. The Velhari Transit Collective used a standard galactic 12-hour clock. She had confirmed that in her orientation packet 3 weeks ago, the day she arrived at Cashin Station for her posting as a survey calibration technician. The clocks in the station ran on the same network as the civilian quarters transit boards, synced to a signal from a relay buoy in the outer ring. They were not supposed to vary. They were certainly not supposed to go backward. The board showed 14:13, then 14:07. Senna pulled out her field notebook, actual paper, the kind her supervisor Merrick assured teased her for carrying, and wrote the times down. She wrote the gaps between resets. She checked her wrist unit, which ran on a separate battery and synced to a different satellite entirely. Her wrist unit said 14:23. The transit board said 14:07. The gap between them was growing. She looked around the hall. The Velhari moved through the space the way they always did, with that particular quality of unhurried efficiency that she had spent 3 weeks learning to read. A pair of traders at the left side kiosk, their pale gray torsos turned toward a transaction display. A transit official behind the entrance arch, his long fingers working through a stack of departure slips. 2 children, Velhari children, compact and silver-eyed, sitting on the floor below the main board, drawing something in the dust with a stick. None of them looked at the board. Not once, in 11 minutes of watching, had she seen a single one of them glance up at the time. That was the second stone, dropped into the same water. Velhari were punctual. Not in the soft, approximate way that humans called punctual. Her supervisor arrived at exactly the same breath count past the hour every single morning, and had explained to her on her second day that arriving early was as rude as arriving late, because it implied the other party was not also on time. They checked transit boards the way a navigator checks instruments, regularly, reflexively, without thinking about it. In 11 minutes, in a transit hall with 30-odd Velhari in it, not one of them had glanced up at the time display. Senna wrote that down too. She dated the entry at the top of the page with her wrist units reading, not the boards. The habit was automatic. She had calibrated instruments for 3 years before this posting, and the first lesson you learned in calibration work was that you never trusted a single source. You triangulated. You compared. You looked for the place where 2 readings disagreed, and you went toward the disagreement, not away from it. She stood, picked up her bag, and walked to the transit official at the arch. He was young, younger than her, she thought, though she still found it difficult to read Velhari age, with the particular angular stillness of someone who was waiting for something specific to happen. "Excuse me," she said. Her Velhari was functional but accented. She used Galactic Standard. "The board says 14:07. My wrist unit says 14:23. Which one is correct?" The official looked at her. His eyes did something she could not name, not widening, not narrowing, but a very small recalibration, the way a camera adjusts its aperture when the available light changes. The board is on scheduled maintenance, he said. It cycles back during diagnostic intervals. Your wrist unit is correct. What time did the maintenance begin? A pause, short but real, at 14:00. So the board has been running a diagnostic for 23 minutes. Yes. Then why does it still show departure times and platform numbers? She kept her voice pleasant. If it's in diagnostic mode, it should display a maintenance notice, not current schedule information. The official said nothing. Also, Senna said, I've been watching it for 11 minutes. It doesn't cycle the departure information. Only the clock resets. The platform numbers are accurate. The 14:30 to the outer ring has been counting down correctly the entire time I've been sitting here. The time is the only element that loops. The departures board reset to 14:07. In the dusty corner, the two children had stopped drawing and were sitting very still. Senna kept her eyes on the official. I'm a calibration technician, she said. I work with survey instruments. What you're describing, a clock diagnostic that loops only the hour display while leaving every dependent countdown accurate, is technically impossible. A diagnostic that affected only the display layer while leaving the underlying time sync intact would require a manual override on the visual output alone. You do that if you wanted the board to appear to show an earlier time while actual operations continued on real time. She tilted her head. Why would you want to do that? The angular stillness of the official's face had not changed, but the two children had stood up, and the traders at the left side kiosk had stopped talking, and the official's long fingers had gone quiet on the departure slips. The hall did not feel like a transit hall anymore. It felt like a room in which a specific thing had just been said out loud. You have been here 3 weeks, the official said. It was not a question. 22 days. And you noticed on the third reset. The second, she said. I understood on the third. He looked at her for a long moment. Something was happening behind his eyes, a calculation, or a communication, or both at once. Senna did not look away. She had learned in calibration work that when an instrument gave you an unexpected reading, you did not apologize to the instrument. You waited for it to resolve. He reached beneath the counter and touched something she could not see, and the board above them flickered once and settled to 14:24. Real time. The departure counters adjusted by 17 minutes, and the 14:30 to the outer ring became the 14:47 without drama, as though it had always been that number. Around the hall, the Velhari resumed their ordinary motion. The traders turned back to their transaction. The children drifted back to the floor, and Senna understood with a cold and peculiar clarity that they had all been waiting, every one of them, for this exact moment. The Velhari Perceptual Survey Collective, the official said, has been studying temporal discordance recognition across 41 registered species for the past 8 station years. The protocol involves a controlled displacement of visible time markers in a public transit environment while real operations continue unaffected. Subjects are not informed. He paused. In 41 species, across 612 administered test environments, no individual has identified the displacement within a single session. 3 species showed delayed recognition, averaging 11 days. The remaining 38 did not identify the displacement at all. The enormity of it took a moment to settle. 612 environments, 8 years, 41 species, and not one of them in a single sitting had looked at a clock and asked why it was lying. She thought about that for a moment that felt longer than 17 minutes. It did not seem like enough time to understand it properly, and she suspected more time would not help. How many humans have you tested? Senna asked. You are the 9th. And the others? All 9 identified the displacement, he said. The fastest in 4 minutes. The slowest required 3 hours and a missed departure before she stopped to investigate. You are the first to confront a collective official directly and articulate the exact technical mechanism before we could initiate the debrief protocol. He paused. We had 4 minutes of contingency time built into this session. You used 1. Senna thought about that. She thought about the 4 minutes of contingency, the gap they had planned for, the gap she had closed without trying. She thought about the 8 other humans who had each, in their own time, in their own way, arrived at the same destination. 4 minutes, 3 hours. Every one of them winding up in front of someone with a clipboard and a question, because every one of them had noticed the board lying and could not let it alone. Somewhere in the hall, something shifted, a collective exhale, or perhaps just the ventilation cycling. The 2 children had moved to stand near the official's counter, silver eyes wide and entirely honest now, with the open attention of the very young watching something they have not expected to see. Senna noticed that one of them was holding the stick they had been drawing with, and that what they had drawn in the dust, she could see it now from this angle, was a careful grid of lines. A clock face. They had been drawing a clock face on the floor of the transit hall, and now they were looking up at her with an expression she could not quite read but felt, distantly, like the beginning of something. "Why time?" she asked. "Of all the things to displace, why the clock?" The official's angular face shifted in a way she was beginning to learn meant something close to respect. "Because it is the most ambient," he said. "It is everywhere and noticed by no one. Schedules run on it, transactions depend on it, bodies track it without the brain's involvement. The assumption is that a species attentive enough to read a transit board will not scrutinize the board itself, that the board is infrastructure, and infrastructure becomes invisible." "Humans have a word for that," Senna said. "The thing that disappears because it works. We call it background." "Yes, every species has a word for it. Every species treats it as invisible." He paused. "Humans appear to be constitutionally incapable of letting the background stay background." She thought about her calibration training. About the first morning, her instructor setting a row of instruments on a table, all reading the same, all calibrated to the same standard, and telling the class to find the one that was off. Half had reached for their own equipment to cross-check. The other half had looked at the instruments themselves, at the way the needles sat, at the angle of the display, at the thing the instruments were doing rather than the thing they were reporting. Her instructor had marked the 2 halves in her head. She had never said which was smarter. She had only said that both halves needed to exist, because an instrument you trusted completely had already stopped being an instrument. Senna had been in the second half. She had always been in the second half. She had never once thought of that as a useful thing to be until now. "I'll need a copy of the displacement log," she said. "The raw data, not the summary. My supervisor will want to see the technical specs on the visual-only override." The official looked at her with that recalibrating stillness. "We don't generally provide the raw data." "I know," she said. "I'm asking anyway." A pause, and then something that might, in a Velhari face, have been the beginning of a smile. Not warm exactly. More like a door that had been unlocked rather than opened. "It will be filed with the debrief report," he said. "You will receive both." She was halfway to the boarding arch when he called after her. "Technician," she stopped. "You said you understood on the 3rd reset. What would you have done on the 4th? Senna thought about it honestly. She thought about the field notebook, and the risk unit, and the way the traders had gone quiet, and the official's careful non-answer about the maintenance window, and the children drawing a clock face in the dust as though they had known exactly what the afternoon was going to ask of her. "Taken a photograph," she said, "then found someone official to explain it. Same thing I did, just slower." She walked through the arch. Behind her she heard the official say something to the children in Velhari. She did not catch the words. She did not need to. The board ran clean and forward, 1431, 1432, 1433, the minutes accumulating without interruption. Outside the transit hall, Cashin Station was bright and enormous in the afternoon light. its towers throwing long shadows across the platform deck, and the whole city above her was cycling through real time, every clock on every surface showing the same true number, not one of them looping back. She found that she could not stop looking at them. It was not a comfortable feeling. It was the feeling of knowing that the background had never been invisible at all, only untested. The clocks had always been there, running their patient numbers in every hall and station and open plaza on the planet, and 41 species had walked past them every day without once asking whether the number was true. She thought about all the other transit halls in the Velhari system, all the other identical boards running their identical loops, and all the other species moving through them without looking up. She thought about every ambient thing she had ever stopped noticing: the hum of her wrist unit, the angle of artificial lighting in a pressurized corridor, the particular way gravity on a station felt slightly wrong compared to a planet, and wondered how many of those she had let become background without meaning to. She opened her notebook to the page with the column of 1407 entries. She did not cross them out. She dated the bottom of the page with the real time, noted the 17-minute discrepancy, and clipped the pen back to the cover. The 1447 boarding call sounded from inside the hall behind her. She had 4 minutes. She did not run.